The Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. expansion is right around the corner, and that kind of batch of products is going to be Wave 9. A year ago today, I made a video called The Future of Marvel Champions, What Do We Need from Wave 8? And Wave 8 is about to come to a close with Magneto. Now, this video is going to be 25 different things that the game would benefit from going forward. We're just going to move through it, and let me know if you agree, disagree, or if there's any other ideas or things you think the game really needs to be in a healthy place going forward. So in my video a year ago, I didn't want any more mutant supports. I thought we'd had enough. There was like 9. We did get another one. It's Stepford Cuckoos, and I kind of like it. It's a bit different, but okay. There's like 10 mutant supports. That's enough. But, you know, I've got this little picture of Avengers Tower you can see from the previous video with a sad face, and that is going to really be my first thing I want us to have. It looks like we have a very high chance of having Avenger heroes in the next wave of Marvel Champions, so I really want some more Avenger support. We've got Quinn Carrier, we've got Avengers Tower, but I would like them to try and avoid the downsides of what we got in the mutant waves, because the biggest kind of culprit, I think, is Utopia. Utopia has a really good effect. After an X-Men ally enters play, ready an X-Men character, that could be your hero. Readying a hero is very powerful because they typically have either a nice balance of stats, which makes it super versatile, or one very good stat, which makes it very powerful. So you have Utopia in your deck. You want to have a steady supply of X-Men to trigger it. So now not only is Utopia going in almost every X-Men's deck, but you are putting in a bunch of allies to try and trigger it. There are exceptions, and you don't need Utopia in all your X-Men decks, but it's definitely very appealing, and it kind of makes decks a little bit more homogenized among the X-Men, just because you're putting all these X-Men in and Utopia quite often. So maybe the kind of extra supports for Avengers I want are maybe in the aspects, or maybe there's a limit on how many you can take, or there's just not that many extra ones. But regardless, I think they'd really benefit from some extra support. I'd also really like to have some maybe Avenger-related sort of upgrades for allies in aspects outside of leadership, just like we did have with the X-Men. I think that's really, really interesting. If you're going to give allies to every aspect, I think it makes sense to make them interesting and have synergies within every aspect, and I think we can expand on that. In a similar kind of vein, we have lots of Avengers in aggression and leadership, but the allies are a little bit thinner in justice and protection for them. So to make sure Earth's Mightiest Heroes works just as well in those aspects, and really lean into the Avenger theme, I think more Avengers in yellow and green would be really good for the game. On to S.H.I.E.L.D., and this is not an original thought, but it's a thought that's been on the channel before and things. Tag Team is a really cool card. Having agents or soldiers back up your hero, super cool, but it's not really a great card. I think it's better than a lot of people give credit for, but it's still a little bit below kind of what you'd be looking for in general. With so many more cards now, it needs some love to get back into decks, and a card like Monarch of Chain would be the perfect solution. It doesn't have to be an ally, it doesn't even have to be exactly the same kind of ally, but something in that ballpark to really enhance and motivate you to play Tag Team, I think would be excellent. I've talked about S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff in, multiple other videos at this point about what I'd like to see, so I won't go into too much detail, but I really do like the S.H.I.E.L.D. events. We've got a couple in Justice, and I'd like to see those in particular, if I had to pick anything, brought into the other aspects like aggression or protection, because we already have good cards in some of those that, maybe we want to keep around but aren't going to be used every turn, that are really good to exhaust, which is what the S.H.I.E.L.D. events in Justice already want. Mixing that around, I think is going to be really, really good for the game. The next topic are better reprints, and I feel like they have done a little bit better in the previous wave anyway, but as I pointed out then a year ago, if you've bought one of every product in Marvel Champions, you would end up with 9 copies of Bait and Switch, which, it's maybe actually got a couple more better heroes to synergize with these days than it did, but it's still not a very desirable reprint to have, and there are a lot of very desirable reprints out there. Fortunately, finally, Magneto is coming with a reprint of Deft Focus, so that has been answered. And the Parent All of Us actually came with Iceman, another 2 copies, so that was really, really good. There's still tons of cards I would love to have more of. And I don't know what we're getting in the next wave. I'd really like limitless stamina, because if I want, Hulk and She-Hulk on the table, I have to divide my 3 copies up between both heroes. That's a little bit annoying for me. If you like to keep multiple decks built at once, only having 3 copies of limitless stamina is going to be limiting, your deck collection stamina. I don't know what I'm saying, but that is a card I really, really would like more of, and I'm not sure we're getting a 14 HP hero in the next wave. Maybe the silhouettes, I'm not convinced, they will be based on what we've seen, but maybe we will. If we won't, or you can't wait, or you just want more anyway, there might be a solution for you. I am very lucky to say we have a sponsor for today's video from Kingdom Come Cards, and they are a service that, if you're in the US, it's a shop. You can buy singles of cards. They also do bundles, accessories if you need more dials, anything like that, sealed products as well. they have everything. So kingdomcomecards.com, it's on the screen now, and you can browse the different categories looking for what you want, which is really cool. But what you can also do is look for the little magnifying glass, go into the search, and just type in the card you really want. Like, I don't know, limitless stamina, and there it is. Add it to your basket, and it's that easy. And do yourselves a favor and use my discount code. It's active for 2 weeks from this moment. It's Villain Theory. So 10% off if you put this discount code in the checkout as you go through Kingdom Come Cards. Villain Theory, tap it in and really benefit from it. And these cards can be so useful if you really need more in your deck building collection. If you like to play two-handed, or have two players building decks from the same collection, or even just keep multiple decks built, what often I find is, one deck will have attack training, the X-Men upgrade in aggression. One deck will have mission training, the ally upgrade in justice, and they really benefit from game time to ready up those boosted allies. The problem is you'll only have 3 copies of game time from Cyclops' pack, whereas if you had 3 more copies, you could put 3 copies into each of those decks, and it's incredibly powerful and incredibly fun. And they are actually, I think, pretty cheap on Kingdom Come cards, so that is my top pick. Another few cards I might recommend if you like to, play two-handed or keep decks built are the Web Warriors. So, a lot of Web Warrior allies come in and out very quickly. Otto Octavius may be the most common one because he's got such little HP. You play him, attack, and you're basically good to go. I think that's very fun. So again, use my discount code Villain Theory at checkout for 10% off. It's active for 2 weeks, and yeah, I hope you guys like this. I thought this was really cool. Aside from Limitless Stamina, one of the other cards I'd really like is Digging Deep. We have 3 copies, but with Magic and Domino and Iron Man and Miss Marvel and Adam Warlock and very soon Magneto, I really need, at least 3 more copies. And Magneto might come with them, we don't know yet. But if he doesn't, that'll just up my demand for even more. Also, obviously, player side schemes, in particular build support and superpower training, they are basic, so a lot of characters are going to be clamoring for them. And let's say I'm playing two-handed or two-player, and I put build support in one player's deck, it's because both players have good support. So getting another copy of build support to put in the other hero's deck and just, really increase the consistency, it's going to be really useful. But right now I'd have to buy a whole extra copy of the Next Evolution expansion, which is, pretty expensive just for those cards. Our next topic is about the aspects and archetypes, and previously I mainly focused on Justice, and honestly I still feel kind of the same way. I do think, as I said last time, Psylocke's pack was very good. I do actually quite like Jubilee's pack a lot, but it's not answered my biggest, things I want, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, but I was just going to cover the other aspects as well. With aggression, we just got the Take That surprise move cards, things which work with upgrades on an enemy, and I think they're pretty good for the characters that have signature upgrades, but even then, they're not great for all of them. I think they're, just slightly lacking. And if you don't have a signature upgrade to put on an enemy and combo with them, pretty undesirable. I'm never taking Marked and Gatekeeper just to enable these on characters which don't already, have an upgrade. It's just not really quite there. New archetypes and things don't have to be the tippity-top most powerful thing ever, but if there is a significant drop-off of most of the established archetypes, I think that's a small problem. We also had cards recently introduced that, give you benefits if your character's health is lower, and I don't think that's really fleshed out quite enough yet. So a little bit more help for both of those archetypes I think would go a long way for aggression. For protection, we actually talked about this on my podcast, Shadow of the Cast with Nelson. Protection would really benefit from a healing archetype. It's got lots of healing cards, but nothing to kind of bring them together. Med Team is already an extremely good card, but Second Wind is rarely played except for maybe the sake of playing it. It's fine, but it maybe needs a little bit of help. A kind of build around card that could interact with it is just what it needs, and I think that'd be really fun. Talking about leadership now, and this might be a bit controversial, but I'm slightly done with team cards, and I think they're really fun, but what I'm talking about are things like Mighty Avengers, Uncanny X-Men. It's a card you'll put in your deck, and I'd even say Web of Life and Destiny, the basic card that rewards you when Web Warriors leave play, and basically you put one of these cards in your deck, or even a couple of copies to make it consistent to find, then you'll just put all the best allies of that team trait, Avenger, Web Warrior, X-Men, into your deck, and that's basically most of the deck. It's very accessible, it is quite thematic, but I don't think it's that interesting. And going into the 9th wave of products, I would like more stuff that is, not reliant on your allies having the right trait, but rather picking the right allies based on different qualities and things, and, making some kind of, cohesive deck based on that. I also think the Sidekick card could be fleshed out a bit more. We've got the side-by-side event. They could do a little bit more. I also talked about this in the podcast with Nelson, but I wouldn't mind some more attacks and forwarding cards and things in leadership. If they're giving leadership events and upgrades and all this, why have all of it focus on allies when even in the core set we were getting ways to boost our hero stats and different things like that? They could have it slightly related to allies still, but really, go all out, morale boost. These are cards which are just about our hero stats, and I think they have a lot more room to lean into things. They could make event characters like Gamora, Ghost Spider, Miss Marvel, just a little bit more interesting in leadership. I think that'd be really fun and not that hard to do. And then we have Justice, and this one's kind of weird. So one of my biggest problems with it at the moment is in 3 and 4 player games, where even the odds and Overwatch, and Overwatch is good even in solo play, but especially in, let's say, big multiplayer, these cards are so incredibly efficient, I feel like I have to put them in my deck. And of course, I also have to do a Skilled Investigator, but you also put one of those in, 1 player, 2 player, whatever. You don't have to, but it really feels like I'm missing out if I don't. And the threat in multiplayer is often so oppressive, to not take the best tools for the job really feels like I'm letting the team down a lot of the time. And, you can combo Overwatch with different things, making an entrance or crisis averted. There's a little bit of a variety, but nonetheless, it's a little bit samey. It's very good, but it feels a little bit overwhelming or, dare I say it, just slightly repetitive. Maybe I've just played too much, but I definitely would like some more varied ways to effectively for the humongous amounts of threats that you have to in multiplayer in different ways. And I wouldn't just want other cards kind of in this league that are this good. I feel like it would have to maybe be mutually exclusive with even the odds or something, a reason not to just run whatever the new card is alongside what we already have, something to create some variety. I kind of feel like they tried to do a little bit of something like this with Team Investigation. It's an alliance card, and it kind of takes the pressure off the Justice player to do some of the threat removal, because they play this card, and then anyone at the table can pay for it. So everyone's now contributing to the huge scaling threat problem in multiplayer, and that's good. But I feel like Team Investigation was a little bit stingy, not quite powerful enough for its cost. They didn't give it the fort trait, so it doesn't combo with Overwatch, which I feel like is wisdom. I feel like that's a good move, but still, I feel like if they were going to do that, it needs to be baseline just a little bit better. And I would love them to try and revisit this, just take the pressure off Justice to have to cram in all these extremely good cards if they could help everyone kind of contribute to the threat removal a little more. But nonetheless, yeah, something to differentiate and increase some variety in multiplayer threat removal would really be something that I think a lot of people would enjoy. My other problem with Justice, which I've also talked about in the podcast, is that it has a lack of what I'd call build around cards or archetype defining cards. Because Justice does have a fair few archetypes, but you can mix and match a lot of cards. It kind of, because there's no unifying cards or anything, it kind of becomes a game of just putting all the best Justice cards in this deck, and it can make things a little bit even repetitive there. Although there are, a decent variety these days compared to the other aspects. For 8 waves of content and the core set, I feel like Justice is lagging behind everyone else. To make my point, here are some sort of archetype, defining cards that I found from other aspects, and I just put these together very quickly. I just skimmed a few cards and slapped them here. It wasn't very hard to do. Then I go to Justice and I'm like, what kind of cards really, help me shape my deck, or, bring some kind of, unifying theme or game plan, that kind of thing. And there's really none that I think compete with these cards, except one, which is fairly recent, which is Float Like a Butterfly. There are certainly cards like One Way or Another, which brings in more side schemes. So you might think, oh, I'll put in Chance Encounter some more and Followed some more. And that's true, but you don't have to. You can actually run any of those cards without any of the other cards just fine. Then you can just put in good stuff in a Justice deck and it will do well. There are cards like that which exist which combo together, but not to the extent that I think you will find in all the other aspects, arguably even the Paul aspect. So definitely would like some more build around sort of defining cards like that to really give some identity to different decks in Justice. Hopefully that made sense. And hey, did somebody just mention the pool aspect? Well, we know from an interview that was on the Winning Hand podcast. Definitely check those guys out. That's where Boom Guy, who does the Every Hero's Worst card series with me, is from. They interviewed Tony Fanchi, one of the lead designers on Marvel Champions, and they basically confirmed what most of us are thinking. If we do get pool again, it's not going to be for a while. It's going to be kind of very, very rare, if ever. And that's fine, but I really think they have the opportunity to fix some of the least popular parts of pool with basic cards. They just need to make basic cards with some kind of interesting synergy that are going to reward us more for, What I say with pool is that a lot of the cards are high risk, low reward when you really want high risk, high reward. So I really think they could, patch that through basic cards. I think that's very possible. So in my video a year ago, I really hoped for cards that worked within the rules because, the Mutant Genesis wave especially, it had a few little problems with some of the wording. However, Tony Fanchi being on the team, being the sort of new designer, I say new, he's been there for quite a while now, I guess, but, his first expansion wave was Next Evolution, pretty good. The latest wave we've had now with, Age of Apocalypse, pretty good. There's maybe like a little few things that come up in a huge card game with hundreds and hundreds of cards. Of course, the little interactions are going to come up. The new rules that Tony took the lead on are really, really good. And we also have the rule specialist, Alex Werner, who's definitely had a lot of questions from me over the years. I really think things are going in a really good direction with Marvel Champions, and I'd like to see that trajectory continued because, for the most part, I don't really have any complaints anymore. So that's really good. What I do want is maybe a simplification of the rules. Marvel Champions is not a complicated, difficult game per se. It's definitely got some levels of complexity that can get really, really deep, but for the most part, it is accessible. The difficult thing is not the gameplay making decisions. It's kind of following some of the rules. Like the defense has paragraphs and paragraphs, and it's a little bit tricky to navigate, I think, for new players especially, because there's these little catches and caveats, and things don't always work the same how you maybe would expect if there's just a slight change in the wording. And even, let's say, Fantasy Flight Games are not willing to do errata on a couple of cards just to make the wording consistent. They could maybe do a simplified version of the rules, which maybe doesn't cover every scenario, but will cover most of them. That's a lot easier for new players to read through. I think the kind of learn to play that comes in the course there is due maybe a little bit of an update. I think that would help people quite significantly. So in my video a year ago, this is basically what I was asking for to summarize it. And, I really felt like some of the villains in the Next Evolution box, it followed a similar slight pattern to some of the ones in Mutant Genesis. Did we get something different? Well, I actually think yes. And there's a small, I put a yellow tick rather than green because we got mostly new stuff. But, Apocalypse in Age of Apocalypse was a little bit of a new version of Hela. I think you can even say Ensabernur. It's actually kind of a new version of Loki. I did a video called The Evolution of Villains, and you can see it more closely in that. And even, the Four Horsemen, very similar to Wrecking Crew. Better in every way. I definitely think those were really good scenarios. So I was actually pretty happy with this. More permanent mod sets. We got some in Next Evolution. We got tons in Age of Apocalypse. They are most of the mod sets in that. Super happy with that. Keep the campaign extras, like Hope Summers and Magneto, into the campaign itself. Side missions did not escape from the campaign in Age of Apocalypse, so very, very happy with that. I really wanted a new standard set in my previous video, and people were like so surprised that, not long after I made the video, we actually got one announced. I didn't have any inside information. I was super excited about that. But there's no new expert set, so I'm going to give that a kind of a halfway tick as well. But nonetheless, Standard 3 has been really, really fun. You guys are still enjoying it. I did a poll recently. I should put it up on the screen with some editing magic. I'd say the majority of people are using it half the time or more, as best I can see from my viewers, which is really cool to see. And then I wanted interactive encounter cards, just interesting encounter cards, which, called out different card types or always did something rather than, just either be ignorable or, just a minion with a bunch of health that just, pops up, defeat it, goes away. Really, I think they did a fantastic job with the encounter cards in Age of Apocalypse. So I'm very happy with this. And for the most part, I'm fine. I don't think we need, I don't need to make a point at least about any more of the stuff. It was all covered pretty well. But Expert 3, where is it? I really want it, and I like Standard 3 so much. Imagine if every expansion came with a new standard set. Now, there is a catch that although maybe campaign, specific allies, seem maybe kept to the campaign, there are still scenario-specific allies, and I have a little bit of a problem with that. If I want to do an Avengers leadership deck and I take it up against one of these scenarios, as soon as I get a scenario-specific ally, some of which, are from the very beginning, now my Mighty Avengers doesn't work, everything's offline, and it's a little bit frustrating to me. I don't know if there's some keyword they could put on these scenario-specific allies to make sure your deck building stuff still works, but as someone who plays, mostly multiplayer, two-player specifically, quite often there's leadership on the board, and a lot of these scenarios kind of just mess up the plan that you could take for that deck, and it bothers me a little bit. It's a pet peeve. They have previewed 4 of the 5 scenarios in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. expansion. 2 of them do have, scenario-specific allies, which could mess up your, Avengers shenanigans or X-Men shenanigans and so on and so forth. But, it's fine. They look like really fun scenarios. I don't believe you start these allies out, so maybe they'll be slightly less intrusive than, let's say, Hope Summers. But we'll have to see how that goes. My hope is that the 5th one does not have scenario-specific allies, but we'll see. Storytelling devices and things that add theme, I do love these, but I just wish they didn't mess with so many, they also mess with certain other aspect decks, but leadership decks in particular are really kind of become a little bit tricky with some of these. Next up, I want to talk about non-minion mod sets. So I've done a lot of mod set videos on my channel recently, and I love modulars in this game. And I already knew, and I think everyone knew, that there were a lot of sets with minions in, and that's fine. I think minions are the best type of encounter card. They're just so interactive with damage and, HP and different effects and things. But when you actually rank the mod sets in difficulty, a lot of the ones which don't have minions tend to be pretty easy. And there are exceptions, but not enough exceptions. So I would love non-minion mod sets, things with more attachments or side schemes and treachery cards. Not minions. I'd love if there was more of a spread of those across the different difficulties. I think that would be really, really helpful and allow a lot more just interesting customization of scenarios. So that is my new request. Also, to talk about permanent sets still, and these are, mod sets where there's a permanent card which starts in play and just alters the game from the beginning. Absolutely love those. I talk about them a ton. They gave me more. I still want even more. Human nature, we're greedy. But what I'd really like now specifically are mod sets which are just one card, one setup permanent attachment to really shake things up from the beginning, but give you full freedom with the encounter deck to do different things with it, rather than something like the Savage Land, which I really like, but you're going to end up putting like 7 dinosaur-themed cards in there, whereas the biggest, most impactful card in that whole set is just the setup card that it comes with. So that is what I'm looking for. Something maybe like the Power Stone, but is more functional like Flight or Telepathy. We also have the new keyword Vulnerable coming in the new expansion, and I would like to see this in mod sets, not just scenarios. They've kept the mod sets very close to their chest so far. I'm really looking forward to those getting revealed, but I'd really love it if I could take minions with the Vulnerable keyword, which means when they're stunned or confused, you discard them, effectively defeating them, but bypassing when defeated effects. I'd like to take those kind of minions to other scenarios, specifically scenarios where the villain is always stalwart, because it feels bad to play, like, let's say, I don't know, Spider-Woman, who has pheromones, which stuns and confuses an enemy, but now I can't use it on the villain. I can use it on any old minion, sure, but it's a lot less effective than putting it on the villain. If I could now use cards like that to defeat minions, they become a lot more useful again. I think that's really interesting and would bring stuns and confuse into stalwart scenarios in a really fascinating way. So mod sets with Vulnerable, fingers crossed, I really hope we get them. So we just looked at Vulnerable, which is kind of a keyword for enemies, but we've also got Temporary, which is a keyword for Cyclops' upgrades that go on enemies, and that's it. They introduced a keyword just for one character and never used it again. What is that? The designer's favorite character or something? I think so. But even Professor X, who came in the same wave as Cyclops, what Temporary does is that card leaves play at the end of the round, just like Professor X, but they didn't even use that keyword for Professor X. And keywords are there to save text space. He's got a lot of text. They could definitely put it on Professor X. Maybe they wanted to keep the complexity down on him, because you've got to, learning what Temporary means is another small learning curve. But nonetheless, I think if you're going to introduce a new keyword, it shouldn't kind of just suddenly go unused apart from one character's cards for multiple expansions. And I actually think Temporary is a really interesting keyword, something being forced to leave play at the end of the round. You can put some powerful effects on, knowing they're not going to stick around forever. You can do some really cool stuff with that. I hope they use it. On a similar note, we have linked cards, and they are using linked again in Magneto's pack now. There's a side scheme for X-Men, which gets you, as you can see here, Anole. Hopefully I'm saying that right. The ally, he's linked to the new recruits player side scheme, but that's locked to X-Men. I want to see cards with linked cards available for more different types of characters and decks. And long story short, a linked card will just sit out of play, but you do the appropriate thing and it will get brought in. And so far, you'll get choice of what you bring in from that linked card. So if you defeat Specialized Training, which is the original player side scheme that is linked, you could choose Surveillance Specialist, which I've got on the screen, or the Attack Boost, or Defensive Specialist, and so on and so forth. So it's really interesting to achieve something, then get a choice of benefits, which, you could, have a plan for already, or you could adapt to the state of the board. That could be really, really interesting. It is really interesting, so I'd like to see more of it. From the wave that Specialized Training came in, we have the Phantom X ally, who has Eva. And Eva is a linked card in everything but name. I was talking to Boom Guy recently, small spoiler alert, I'm going to be on the Winning Hand podcast again, look out for that in the future. Eva feels like a card that could have been set out of play, and when you play the Phantom X ally, is then brought in. Eva clogging up your deck, being basically a dead card until you find Phantom X, doesn't feel great. So I definitely think they can make more use of linked, and I think it's super interesting to explore. I think it opens a whole new world of, card design and choices within games for players as well. So I feel like there's only positives by doing more of linked cards. Really cool. One of the last topics I want to cover here are new ways to survive damage from, specifically the villain, but mainly, the scenario, the encounter. And we've just got Come Get Me Bub. We're about to get Noble Sacrifice. These are very cheap cards which can give you tough status cards and healing, which means, oh, I don't have to just block with an ally all the time. I've got different ways to survive. I think that's amazing. I love these. And just like with, permanent mod sets and things like that, when they give me something, I want more of it. But it's only because it's a good thing to have. Anything that means I don't have to take, X amount of allies just to make sure I can survive. It's just going to increase variety. And just because we have these, I don't think they should stop here. I think even more variety is going to be even more interesting. They could start to tie some of these kind of ways to survive, get tough, healing into existing archetypes or new archetypes. I really think the sky is the limit, and it's going to really add a lot more variety than, oh, I'm getting attacked, I just block with this ally, which I think is the most common way attacks are dealt with across Marvel Champions. I don't know how everyone plays, but certainly when I'm at my local shop or if I'm watching people stream online, allies blocking is incredibly common because it's incredibly good, but because the ways to block otherwise are incredibly limited. Aside from toughs and healing, stun is an option, but steady and stalwart became so prominent, especially on expert mode, that it's really, taken the desirability of stuns down. They did add that aggression card, which stuns, recently, but you need a side scheme in the victory display, and it's overpriced, anyway, in my opinion. So, I still think they have some ways to go with that. But these two cards, Come Get Me Bub and Noble Sacrifice, I think are awesome. So I would like more. We are basically at the end of the video now, but if you've watched this far, there's one more surprise for you, an extra kind of thing that I think would be really good for the game that I think a lot of people would really support, and that is multiverse rules. So if you've ever had one character in play and played two-player or two-handed or even four-player, whatever, someone else is maybe playing your signature ally as a hero, so now you can't play your signature ally. Let's say you're playing Gamora, your Nebula signature ally is so good, but somebody's playing Nebula, and oh great, you've got the team up card in your decks, that's really good. But you're able to add one card that's really cool, but you lose one other card that's already really cool. Some signature allies feel so inherently useful, it just feels bad not to be able to play them, to just have a dead card stuck in your deck because somebody else wanted to play this fun hero. I think that's fine. I don't think they should feel bad for it. But certainly I think if they just, added a few lines, a couple paragraphs and a new rule set that you could say, hey, when you start a game, you can declare that you're using multiverse rules, and now you can, play characters with a unique symbol when there's already a unique symbol. You need slightly more rules than that. It could get a bit messy, but we already can have, 4 or 5 Spider-Men in play at once. I don't think it's a big deal. Let Valkyrie use the Bifrost to play a different Valkyrie. I think that's completely fine. If anyone reads comics or watches the MCU movies, multiverse and multiple versions of one character, everyone's familiar with this. It's a card game. Let's do it. But to go into the summary properly, this is kind of where we're looking at new Avenger stuff and new Shield stuff. I think that goes without saying that we're probably getting that. Good reprints kind of goes without saying. If we have to have reprints, let's have some really useful ones. And I guess if we don't get them, there's Kingdom Come cards, but I'm really hopeful we'll get some good ones. And if it was limited stamina, I would be very, very happy. I won't go over all the aspect stuff I talked about again, but really, I think Justice is something I would like to have a lot of work. I think we're getting a Justice character in the expansion books, and we'll be getting one in the wave, presumably, unless they do like a multi-aspect thing, which ate some of our Justice slots up in the past. But nonetheless, we should get 2 new Justice precons, which will hopefully address at least one, if not both, of the things I particularly want. Expert 3, it has to be coming in this wave, right? It has to be in wave 9. Another standard set, though, I would love that. And honestly, this temporary keyword only being on Cyclops cards really bothers me. So I'm actually really hoping we get to see that used again. I'm not convinced we will, but fingers crossed that it's there. That about brings us to the end of the video. If you've enjoyed this, please leave a like on the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is there anything that you'd really like in Marvel Champions that I didn't talk about? And again, thank you to the sponsor for this video, Kingdom Come cards. If you're looking for individuals of any cards, if you're looking for any of their bundles or anything else, and they also do have sealed packs, they have all sorts. If you're in the US, please check them out at kingdomcomecards.com and use my discount code VillainTheory, available for the next 2 weeks. Still good deals in there if you miss out on these 2 weeks if you're watching in the future. But if you're watching, now when it's valid, just do it. And that does it. So I'll see you in the next video, and fingers crossed we get some amazing stuff in the next wave of Marvel Champions.